Hello, friends. Welcome to Led to Gold, the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. Before we get into the whole thing, I would just like to say I'm so happy that you're here. I just absolutely love putting this out into the world, and I would love for this community to grow in any way possible. So if you have been here before, thank you so much for returning. I would love it if you like this episode, you'd share it with a friend who you think could potentially use its wisdom. And aside from that, I want to let new people know, first off, hi, I'm so happy you're here. And second, Led to Gold is not just a podcast, it's also a blog. So if you like getting a lot of your lessons, a lot of your conversations, such as these realistic wellness things in the form of writing, I also have a website where my blog lives, and that is ledtogold.blog. Easy. If you want to stay really up to date with the things that are going on the podcast, on the blog, be the first to know what's coming, and also get another couple little goodies thrown in there, I send out a monthly newsletter. This is truly only once a month, not spammy, just fun. I like to include a little short list of things that I'm reading, things that I'm watching, like what's the inspiration coming from at this point in my life. And I put a lot of work into these to make them just like really cute and fun and interactive. And the best part is every single month you get a new playlist, and it's cross-platform, so you can choose between the available platforms to you, so you get that playlist right to wherever you listen to your music. And it's fun. And if you didn't know, I used to be a radio DJ, so I love just incorporating all of these different things into the work of Led to Gold. So if you're liking it, there's lots more than what you're getting right now, right here. So I would love for you to take a look. But above all, share, let people know if you think somebody in your life could benefit from our conversations here. And I really appreciate you being here. So thank you. Okay. Hi. I'm so exhausted. Wow. The past few weeks have been kind of bad. I'm not going to lie. I'm just really going through the motions of watching a world try not to spin into total, utter, constant chaos. And I don't mean for that to sound nihilistic and terrible. I still have, obviously, a lot of hope for the world. I always do. But man, that's kind of all I have to say on that for right now. It's been a lot, and I'm trying to go through my day and be normal, but I truly, and I've said this multiple times this week to my close friends, I don't know how to be normal right now. I really don't. I don't know how to have conversations with people like everything's fine when it's just not. And really, I say that to say, if you feel crazy, you're not, because I'm right there with you. And I just want to honor the feeling of resistance toward hyper-normalizing this kind of thing, because we are overexposed. And that is actually quite a lot of the same conversation that we're going to get into today. But before I really got into our conversation, I just wanted to name like where I've been, and I'm truly all good. Like, things are good. I know that this will turn around, but I am having a hard time with the state of the world right now. So if you are too, we're in it together, and I love you. And I want to, as always, be a source of light and a source of hope. So that is what I intend to bring always, always, always to this platform. But I got to be honest sometimes when things are getting hard, because that's also part of it, Our conversation today is, as I just mentioned a second ago, definitely going to get into the overexposure of information, which is kind of a common thread in a lot of the conversations that we've had here lately. But I want to start first with a little bit more of a grounded situation, something that I think if you can relate to this scenario, then this is definitely an episode that you're going to want to stick around for. And it is this. I personally, and I'm sure many of us out there, have a massive folder of screenshots on our phone. Of course, many of those screenshots are just going to be funny text threads, maybe some memes. But more often, if I were to really go back through them and look, I'm sure a lot of my screenshots contain messaging from wellness blogs, wellness creators, like things that I have seen on social media that are supposed to help me in some way. Like, I have read this thing and I've gone, wow, that's really good advice. I want to save that for later. So I screenshot it. And then I never look at it again, because how many things are in my screenshots folder? I don't know, like 600 probably. It's a lot of stuff that I don't have time to go back and look into, nor can I organize it in any way that would actually make sense to my brain, nor do any of my saved videos on Instagram ever get watched, that sort of thing. We tend to like to gather things that look nice. You know, Pinterest might be another example of this, but at least that one kind of has an organizational system. But we like to gather these things and then think that we are going to benefit from them, only to never look at them ever again. It's very similar to the general idea of having a tech amnesia. I don't know a better word or phrase to use for that, but the sensation of scrolling on a platform and then 2 seconds later, you don't remember what you just watched. If you had to think about the video that you saw 2 scrolls ago, could you remember what it was? The answer is almost always no, I don't remember what I just saw. It's a very similar idea. And I think more and more we find ourselves here. To give even a non-tech, non-social media example, you could think of buying a ton of books and never reading any of them. It's almost like you buy the books just to have the books. And I don't want to, hate on anybody who does that, because I definitely have done my fair share of that, but it's the same idea. The crux of this conversation, though, has to do with the true sense of, oh, wow, this is such a great piece of advice. I'm going to save it and it's going to change my life. Or I'm going to read over this. I'm going to incorporate it into my life. We cannot really control what our brain does in that moment where it says, ooh, that's a good idea. We can't back out of that. We can't negate that. But what we start to eventually learn is that, oh, I'm never actually looking at this stuff, and I'm never actually, more so than looking at it, incorporating it, because I have immediately forgotten the thing. The moment we find a new, quote unquote, life-changing framework, our brain treats the discovery itself as the victory. We will feel better for like 20 minutes as we're saying, great, okay, I'm going to implement this new thing. Or, great, okay, I just had ChatGPT give me a bunch of journal prompts and I did them and I journaled about them and now I feel like I have my whole life together. But then the effect fades, because even writing about it isn't actually doing it, isn't actually living it, isn't actually learning the thing. And then tomorrow we're going to go back for another hit of a new podcast or a new book or a new self-help creator. It's an endless cycle that our brain really, really loves in the moment. It's very addictive. It feels good to think you're learning something new, because our brain confuses learning with just simply reading. But that's not what we're doing. This kind of work, the learning doesn't happen in the brain. It actually happens way, way, way deep in the body. And that is a place we are a lot less familiar with. This is a conversation that I am by no means saying I have incorporated into my own life. Everything I talk about here is hyper relevant to me in the moment. So I just want you to know, as we get deeper into it, I'm here right now. I am experiencing the same thing and I'm tired of it. I'm at a turning point where I'm like, wait, hold on. I have gathered so much information. I have read so much. I feel like I'm learning, but I'm not actually changing. And that is the turning point that tells me it's time to actually do something about this, because I don't want to keep doing this. I want to actually incorporate the lessons that I want to learn. I want to actually change my life in the ways that I want it to be changed. So how do we do that when our brain really just loves to chase the feeling of knowing something new? And that's all fine and good, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that we want not to just learn something new. We want to change. We want to embody that learning. The short answer is this, and we're going to get into a lot more detail about it as we go along, but to actually implement a big lesson, say like nervous system regulation or how to actually utilize boundaries with people in our lives, it requires a thing that our brain likes a lot less because it's boring and it's time consuming. It requires cognitive space. It requires a little bit of boredom. If our schedule is already collapsing under its own weight, and by the way, this is literally that is the sensation of the poetry piece I just put out on the blog, which I'll put in the show notes if you want to read it. It's a quick read. A new wellness habit is going to feel like another item on the rubric of the test we have to pass. It's going to feel like just another thing rather than a relief. If we don't incorporate it, it just becomes another screenshot in the file. It just becomes another note on the to-do list. And we don't want that because that is not healing. Another little potential pitfall, potential obstacle in actually learning how to do this is the idea of having to stay on pace with the obligations that we already have in our lives that we really can't escape. Unless we did something really, really big, like quit our jobs or leave a relationship or whatever the situation may be, which is not at all what I'm suggesting anybody has to do. But my point is, we have obligations to the people in our lives and to the work that we do and to the chores that need to get done and to our pets and like all of the things that we really can't escape. There is the constant thrum of life work. Always, always, no matter what. We must acknowledge the fact that our time is extremely limited and that the system we live under, the systems, I suppose, that we live under, really don't want us to have a lot of free time in order to do this work truly and fully and completely. Because as we all know, it's almost trite to say at this point, any free time that we do tend to have, most of us will fill it with something like scrolling or watching Netflix, or even if it's not something mindless, like any of those tasks, our free time is one of the few times we get to actually do the hobbies that we want to do, like read, like make art, like work on our cars, make podcasts. You know, there's so many things that we don't get enough time to do in a regular day that free time becomes time to do the things that we want to do, but the things that are active, right? There is very little time in anyone's day ever, no matter what you're filling that free time with, to just sit with yourself. That is almost always the last thing that we want to do. We don't really know how to do this anymore. We have lost the language of integration, which is a word I am 1000% going to circle back to. So it just becomes, like I said, almost another task, almost another thing that you have to like fit on your calendar to do. And I want to acknowledge that there is a little bit of truth to this. Yes, in order to really make a lesson sit with us, in order to really heal from something and change our ways with something, change a bad habit, whatever it is, we are going to have to build some time in our day to address those things. And I know that that is really hard for a lot of people. Even having that out of the way, I'm circling around to the ways that we actually do incorporate this work, but why don't the lessons sink in? Well, we've addressed a couple of things already. As I just said, we really don't have a lot of time to do it. And we don't give ourselves time to do it because we don't know what that time is supposed to be filled with. The spoiler alert is like really mostly nothing, but I'll get to that. In general, healing, true integration requires stillness and a little bit of boredom, and something that a lot of us really, really don't have the ability or language for anymore, which is to look inward, to truly reflect without the help of any outside source. The only real reflection is between you and yourself, and that is not something that an internet platform or ChatGPT can help any of us with. We must do that work ourselves. There's actually a really interesting study being done about, forgive me if I get this a little bit wrong because I'm not a neuroscientist or a psychologist, but there is what I understand to be a sort of new understanding of how certain parts of our brains work. And I do want to pause here to talk about this because it is the actual part of the brain that helps us to do this work. It's hard to access, but I want to read you a little bit of an abstract from a PubMed study titled "The Journey of the Default Mode Network: Development, Function, and Impacts on Mental Health." And this came out just last year, so it's relatively new findings, and I find it really relatable and really pivotal to the conversation that we're currently having. So the default mode network is a brain network that becomes active when the brain is at rest. It's crucial for processes like self-reflection, emotional processing, social interaction, and mental exploration. The internal mental activity hypothesis, also known as spontaneous cognition, is a theory that describes the role of the DMN in the generation and manipulation of internal thoughts during periods of rest and introspection. According to this theory, when individuals are not engaged in external or externally directed tasks, the DMN becomes active, facilitating reflection on the self, the retrieval of personal memories, and the mental simulation of past and future events, as well as the planning of imaginary scenarios. Internal mental activity involves processes such as self-awareness, self-reflection, and mental prospection, in which individuals explore and elaborate their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So, what I find very interesting about this is that a lot of these brain tasks, as I'll call them, are quite common. Like, we do these things often. We self-reflect often. But in order to actually integrate the lessons that we want to integrate, we have to give our brains more time to do this. And we can only do that if, as this abstract says, the brain is not engaged in an external or an externally directed task. Unfortunately, in the fall of capitalism, right? We're always doing tasks. We're always busy. So it's very hard to allow this work to actually occur. Even with that explanation under our belt, which I think is extremely helpful just to really understand how the brain works and how it operates, the other thing that I think is a little bit more of a grounded take that we can just relate to by talking about it is the fact that we are very afraid of being bored, again, especially in this age of constantly being busy. We don't really know how to do this anymore. And unfortunately, in order to do this work, we have to be bored. It involves sitting with a lesson, whatever the lesson may be. It could be an affirmation. It could be taking the advice from one of these dumb screenshots that we saved 6 months ago, whatever it is, without the dopamine hit of actually learning the thing for the first time. Our brain, again, responds well to the initial reading of the thing and feels like, I learned a new thing. It doesn't get that same feeling when we actually try to sit with the work. And we will opt to fill that blank time, that boredom, with the very thing that we actually need to do less of, just because we so desperately want to avoid the stillness and the boredom. Our brains hate it, and it's hard to fight our brain. Beyond that, I think another thing that gets complicated is the actual advice that we're oftentimes receiving from outside sources, even if we want to incorporate it, isn't going to work on a one-size-fits-all basis. I cannot tell you how many different little tweaks I've tried to make in my routine, especially in my exercise routines, like when I go to the gym and work out. I cannot tell you how many iterations of people's routines I've tried. And to be entirely honest with you, none of them ever worked long term. None of them. Because they weren't built for me. I've talked about this before too on the show, but we often see creators building something and publishing something that worked for them. Therefore, their belief is that it will work for anybody else as well. Because it worked for them, it's going to also work for you, which is not true. It's just not true. But in order to sell something, in order to even just sell a belief, that is the language that you oftentimes need to use, because who's going to buy it if they don't think it's going to work for them? There's also this sort of friction between the language that is used on social media by influencers, by creators who want you to ascribe to whatever they're telling you has worked, and maybe it will work for many people. But the thing that they are saying is doable, they are hiding how actually difficult it is to practice in a life where we are so busy. Take this as an example, a few examples just off the top of the dome. If someone is telling you to protect your energy or to set boundaries, like really, really set your boundaries, the more low-level reality, the thing that most of us are experiencing is, well, I'm a school teacher and this parent is angry at something that is happening in the classroom, and they don't know me and I don't know them, but we're having this email battle back and forth because they're trying to get an issue resolved for their student, and I'm trying to be a good advocate for the student as well, but we're coming at it from different angles, right? How do you practice boundaries in a real-time situation where, like, you must talk to this person? Of course, if somebody got really out of hand, I would do something about that. But just, as an example, right? It feels selfish or impossible to do something like that, to protect your energy, quote unquote, when people are counting on you, when you have a real tactical job to do that involves other people needing you. Here's another example. Just be present. Okay. What does that mean though? Like, for somebody who doesn't often feel their body, who doesn't often meditate deeply, for someone who is on their feet all day, working with multiple people a day. Again, I'll use the teaching example because, yeah, it's a chaotic job. I love it because I'm never bored, but oh boy, doesn't that get back to a conversation from earlier, right? And you're worrying about things at work while you're also worrying about things at home, and everything's a distraction. And then now I've got to take care of this thing. And like, we're all multitasking all day long. So to be present, to just be present, what does that actually feel like in real time? What does that actually look like when we're not just straight up meditating? Presence is probably one of the hardest things in the world when the singular moments that we get are just series of different chores that have to get done. One more example. Listen to your body's wisdom, or the answers are within you. Everything you need is within you. Okay, true. Yes, I believe that. I do fundamentally believe that. But the body's wisdom is often drowned out by like the reality of the day, right? It's very similar to presence. I would love to listen to my body all day long, but there's an appointment to book. There's a parent to email back. There's the morning alarm going off when I was in the middle of a really nice dream. And now I don't get to listen to my body and experience the end of that dream, because real life clashes with these idealized advice pieces that the internet gives us. And I'm not even saying that these creators are being vindictive in posting them. I think that it is genuinely good advice. It's just very difficult to implement in the current lifestyle that most of us are living through. Then we come to a critical juncture. Not only are we now stressed and upset at ourselves because we can't seem to let this lesson sink in, but we're also feeling guilty about not giving ourselves the time to do it, even when, as we have so clearly discussed, it's nearly impossible to give ourselves time to do it. So where do we go from here? Because clearly there are a lot of obstacles that get in the way of doing the real work of healing, whether they are self-imposed or put in place by the systems that we largely can't control. How do we do it? Well, I think the very first thing is also the hardest thing, because I know this and yet I'm still having a very hard time implementing it. But maybe in time, and maybe talking about it here will help not only me, but several of us really start to get to the bottom of it. Here is the thing that I know needs to be done. First, we need to stop the flow of information. We need to quite literally put our brains, put our minds in a framework that says, okay, I can go on social media, I can scroll, I can enjoy the content that I'm used to enjoying, but I am not going to look for the next solution to fix my life. I am not going to save these posts or screenshot them for later, because there will be no later. I will not be looking at this probably ever again. Give yourself the permission to just intake and be done with it. But we are not searching for the solution. We have enough. Now, on an even deeper level, we probably already know, if we do even just give ourselves 5 minutes when you're done with this episode, or even right now if you want to pause it. If you sat in silence for 5 minutes, it probably wouldn't even take that long, honestly. You probably know the lesson that needs incorporating right now. You can probably verbalize the thing that you are trying to integrate. So start there and let that be the thing. Let that be your North Star. Write a note to yourself, put it on your altar, put it on your bathroom mirror, wherever you're going to see it often, as like an affirmation. And just know that there is nothing else that needs to be integrated other than that one thing. Because any more than one thing is going to be too much. Instead of incorporating a million different little lessons, a million different little sound bites, a million little different carnival, what do you call it? Carousel? Carousel posts. What is the one thing that survives the noise? What is the one thing that it all gets distilled down into? That is the thing to rest in. Another way to just think about this, and again, like if you even wanted to just pause really quick and think to yourself or journal about this, If you had to delete every single app off your phone, I'm talking every single like social media app, everything that's not just functional like your phone or your pictures or whatever. If you had to delete every single app and every book off your shelf and only keep one truth to live by, what would it be? Right in this moment. That could change over time, but just right now, what is the one truth that you know you're trying to experience in this life? And look, I'm going to keep this episode relatively brief because I don't think there's that much more to say other than we have to give ourselves the time to do this. And beyond having the time, which is already a pretty tall order, we need to do it enough that our body becomes familiar with the feeling of integration. And that is yet another boulder to push up the hill. That is yet another thing that is a tall order. This is not an easy thing to do, especially not under the constant movement that we experience in our culture today. And not to make it meta, but it kind of is. I am a girl who loves to listen to a podcast. As much as I love having a podcast, I love listening to podcasts. And I listen to a lot of wellness and self-help type podcasts. I get a lot of advice thrown at me. I save a lot of episodes. And oftentimes it ends up being just the same pattern that we have been here talking about for the last 30 minutes. Those things don't really ever get absorbed because there's too many other things to try to absorb. So, what is the one thing that I'm trying to absorb right now? I'm going to tell you, and I'm actually going to put this in place of our "we're not really strangers" question because it really is something that I'm going through in the moment, and I want you to know that I'm in the process with you. I have probably talked about this before, but I have struggled for so long with my routine throughout my day, but mostly the morning. I've said before, I don't remember which episode it was, but it wasn't long ago. I have said that getting up, like literally physically waking up and staying awake, is the hardest part of my day. And it's not even close. That is the hardest thing for me to do. But the joy that I get from having a productive morning is so immense. The problem is it's not immense enough to overtake the pain of waking up early. I don't know how to explain it better than that in this moment, but it's true. You know, they always say, like, you're not going to break a habit until the keeping of the habit is more inconvenient than breaking the habit. Like, it has to hurt you more to stay in the thing than to actually change what you're doing. That is the experience that I'm having. And I just don't really know when the levee's going to break at this point because I hate how my mornings are. I hate how rushed I am. I hate that I literally stay in bed, I don't know, as absolutely to the last second as late as I possibly can. And then I only give myself enough time to like make a coffee, brush my teeth, put on deodorant, put on a shirt, and walk out the door. Like, I don't get to wake up and start my day intentionally at all. I don't give myself the ability to do it. And then the rest of the day, I feel like I'm rushing. The rest of the day, I feel like, fuck, I could have worked out this morning. I could have journaled this morning. I could have read a few pages of my book, but now instead I have to find time to do that later in the day. And guess what? By the time I get home from work, working with children all day long, I'm way too exhausted to do any of those things. So it doesn't happen. But yet, I haven't broken that habit. And I haven't integrated the lesson of how genuinely good it feels, how genuinely amazing it feels to have a productive morning. This has been, I'm not joking, like a 7-year struggle for me. I don't know what makes it so hard, but I am determined to work through it. And I know now, having this conversation, having at least done a little bit of the work of acknowledging, okay, there are so many things I want to do. There are so many things I want to improve in my life. So many. And I'm sure there are for you too. But what is the one thing that you care so deeply about, you would be willing to put all of the other things to the side? Not even forever, just temporarily while we're letting this one sit. What is that one thing? For me, it's the morning routine. And here's the last thing that I will say just as we part. I did mention that I would get back to the word integration, and I just want to talk for a moment about how deeply I love this word and how you might think about incorporating it into your life. Okay, so here's the thing. If you have ever gone to a psychedelic retreat, or if you have ever done potentially psychedelics of any kind, there is an integration process that happens in the aftermath of that event. So maybe it doesn't even need to be psychedelic. It's just where I have experienced it. There is a period of time after you experience what could be a life-changing thing where you must integrate that lesson. And what that period of time looks like is intentional solitude, but with support. You know, if you need somebody, there is somebody there guiding you through the process. But the work itself happens in solitude. It is free for you to go out into the world, to rest, to walk, to journal. And it is time for you to just sit with the thing that happened, the experiences you had, the sensations you had, and figure out where they fall in your life. The facilitator for this particular retreat that I went on was really helpful in describing this as when you get a really lovely but large snowfall. And if you've ever had snow in your life, you would know that, like, if you get a really nice layer of snow on the ground, you're going to see where it blankets over things that were already there. So, for example, like, I have a garden bed. You can see where the garden bed is, but it's kind of like lumped over with snow, and then it like slopes back down. That is what the integration process is like. As soon as the event happens, it's like all of the snow falling and catching and creating a layer over top of the life you lived before. Once the snow is all there and it's created that blanket, you really admire it for this brand new thing. You're like, wow, I've never really experienced the world like this. That is the very beginning of your integration process. That is you saying, wow, okay, this is different. Wow, okay, I'm trying a new thing. I'm letting this new thing settle into my life. This is different, but it's beautiful and I like it and I want to make it last. But we all know that the snow doesn't last. Eventually it's going to settle and melt. Eventually it's going to go away completely. That is where effectively your life starts to go back to normal, starts to fade away. The newness of the integration period starts to fade. This is the part where the honeymoon phase is over. This is the part where people drop off their New Year's resolutions because they got over the newness of it and now it's not as fun. Now it's like, oh, okay, well, I actually have to either keep up with this or I'm going to decide that it's not worth it or it's not changing my life as much as I wanted it to. So I'm going to let it go. This is the moment where you don't let go. You integrate enough that it feels natural for that new part of you to stay. And I, in no way, want to blanket statement say that it can be done and that it's easy to do, because I know just as well as you do that it is not. This is not easy, but it is possible. So that's where I want to leave us today. And I know this episode felt maybe a little bit different structurally than most of ours do. But if you got something out of it, I would love it if you would, number one, share with a friend who might also enjoy it. But number two, equally as important, please let me know what your thoughts are on this topic. Please let me know what the thing is that you're trying to integrate. I genuinely love hearing from you all so much. It makes my day every single time. And this conversation, because it is so hyper relevant to me, like I'm going through it too. And I want to hear from you and I want to build camaraderie around this. So absolutely reach out to me. On Instagram would be lovely, but anywhere you can would be also lovely. And again, I will see you next week on the blog and the week after that with a new episode. I did tease last week that we were going to have a guest, but this time I'm serious. We are actually going to have our first guest from season 2 of Led to Gold. And I am so excited to bring this to you. I absolutely can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. But for now, go take care of yourself. Go be bored. Go rest. And actually, please rest. Stop doing so much if you can help it. Whatever little tidbits of time in your day you can take to stop doing things, please stop doing things respectfully. You need it, and I need it, and we all need it. Okay, that's all. I love you. Bye.